What is the worst advice you've ever received? Story 1. When I was an aspiring educator, I received a lot of scary advice about how school teachers should run a classroom from people who were well-intended but were completely out of touch. The most memorable was from a woman who had been a special education teacher for years, and her nugget of wisdom was to never say sorry to a student and never admit you're wrong. My philosophy as a teacher could never be more opposite. Story 2. You should let it pinch you, it won't hurt that much. It was the biggest crawdad I ever saw, and I was like maybe 10 fishing with my dad. He didn't think I would be stupid enough to do it, but I wanted to impress him. The chaos that then ensued. I picked it up and let it pinch the soft skin between my thumb and hand, promptly screaming in pain, and my dad is laughing his butt off, trying to help just to be pinched by the other claw on the back of his hand. This cycle of continuous pinching continues as we stupidly try to help one another, then finally we get it removed, and my dad says to body slam it, so I throw it as hard as I can back into the lake. Ah yes, the things we try to do to impress our dads and make it seem like we are tough. That was probably such a funny scene to watch, with the dad laughing all while trying to remove the crawdad, and after all that commotion, the little bugger makes a miraculous escape back into the water. To be fair, the pinch probably would not have hurt as much if they had made it grab onto a less sensitive area. Story 3. I scraped somebody's truck in our apartment complex a few weeks after I first got my license at 18. In my defense, he was very over the lines and it was the only available spot. Called my dad in a panic because I didn't know what to do. He told me to go park in the lot of the apartments next to us and to just pretend like nothing happened unless someone confronts me. New and inexperienced, I listened. Horrible advice. Someone saw it, and the guy found out which apartment I was in. He was pissed, but more understanding when he realized I was just a kid. To a guy in his 40s, I guess 18 is a kid, and explained what happened. We worked insurance stuff out, and I learned to never take my dad's advice. Story 4. There was this one time a very attractive girl from my hometown took an interest in me and started messaging me on Facebook. She was the smart, good person, beautiful girl that was always in long relationships, absolutely not getting around, and the kind of girl that you would love to take home to your parents, and who every guy wanted to be dating. Anyways, my idiot friend was watching me talk to her and was like, dude, you're doing it wrong. Let me take over. And completely submarined the conversation with a couple of douchey, idiotic messages, and she stopped responding. And that was it. My chance with her was gone. I'll never forget his stupid face laughing about it like, haha, oh well, whatever, dude. Yeah, screw you, Dan. Story 5. A friend of my mother's, close enough to be my aunt, talked to me into applying for a credit card when I was 22, for the sole purpose of maxing it out, getting as many big toys as I could, and then filing for bankruptcy, because she said, this country is so silly, threatening something like that when it just disappears a few years later. So, I got the first credit card offered, $25,000 limit, with what I now know was the worst, most predatory APR, and I maxed it out on utter crap over the course of 2 years. It messed me up so bad. As she gradually devolved from funny, cynical ex-hippie boomer to wheelchair-bound dementia patient, I started trying to build some semblance of a workable adult life. Got married, had a kid, and that bankruptcy followed me into my mid-30s. Even though it's past me now and my credit score is finally in the mid-700s, I still have to divulge yes every time I'm asked by a banker or lender about a bankruptcy in my history. I want to transport myself back in time as a now 50-year-old and kick my own behind right before I signed that form. My God, why do adults sometimes tell kids to do this kind of crap? Boomers, man. The advice given started out like it could have been decent, but quickly went off the tracks and into stupid territory. Opening a credit card after you turn 18 is generally a good idea, as it allows you to build some credit history early on and get a good age of credit. But part 2 of that is paying off the card each month. So basically, the exact opposite as the advice given. I wonder what they blew all their money on, though. In the comments, what would you blow your $25,000 on? Story 6. Work your butt off and always be the best employee. I worked most of my adult life doing overtime, coming in for extra shifts, and taking on extra responsibility. Now, I'm not even in my 30s, and I'm burnt out. Do what you get paid to do. Take days off. You're not going to be on your deathbed thinking you should have worked more. Story 7. Don't take that IT job. Go to a university. 20 years later, I'm doing better than my siblings with master's degrees, but kept my lifestyle quite low-key, so they assume I'm struggling because I don't fetishize wasting $60,000 on a brand new truck every 3 years. Story 8. Got my German Shepherd about 8 years ago. He immediately started puking up anything. So I took him to our emergency vet and was told he has megaesophagus. Basically, he has a segment in his esophagus that doesn't have proper muscle contractions, so rather than pushing food down, it just stays there, sags, forms a pouch until he throws it up. The vet told us we wouldn't be able to manage because he'd grow up to be a big dog. I didn't realize he was suggesting that we put him down. Yeah, screw that. I had fed him a paste of blitzed up kibble mixed with water for months. He had to eat it from up high. I had fed him, and gradually, at 6 months, he started eating solids. Kibble soaked in the water for a while with water on the bowl on a platform. And now he eats regular food, just off a high platform so he doesn't bend down. And he is the best dog ever. Story 9. Just push yourself to get better. Do a bit more each day. When I had a post-viral condition, ended up trying to prove to people that I was trying hard enough and not letting it beat me, and destroyed my health permanently. Spent a year bedbound, another 2 years using a wheelchair, and 20 years later, I need a stick to walk and still can't work because my health fluctuates so much. Genuinely worried for all the people recovering slowly from COVID who are being told this same crap when if they just rested and took it at their own pace, they'd likely recover to near previous health. Yeah, I don't know if what they are trying to say was to be like mentally tough and stay motivated to get better, suggesting that your wellness can be affected by your mindset. That's a little bit different from exerting your body beyond what it should do. This person is exactly right. When your body is super tired and you're having trouble getting out of bed, that is your body giving you clues. Like, hey genius, we need to rest please. Thanks. Story 10. Don't try. I started playing soccer at a really late age, 16, and I tried out as a junior and got cut. Someone quit and I was offered a spot on JV. I played with a friend on that team and I asked him what I should work on after the season so I wouldn't get cut again. He literally told me, if I were you, I wouldn't even try, and I wasn't good enough and that there was too much talent on varsity, so I should try out for basketball instead of soccer. I didn't let it bother me, instead I used it as fuel. I started playing everywhere I could. I make the team the next season and get invited to play at the local junior college. Fast forward 2 years and I'm on the front page of the newspaper in our town, signing a full soccer scholarship to play in Kansas. One day I see him as I'm getting food and I ask him what he's been doing. He turned into a giant pothead and worked at a smoke shop and was telling me how he saw me in the paper and he knew that I'd be good one day. I shook his hand and never saw him again. Story 11. Go and catch that ferret. You can do it. Here's a tea towel, said my next-door neighbor to me after I went around to warn him that there was a wild ferret loose running between our gardens, and his back door was left open. That ferret bit my finger. I bashed it off, then it latched onto my thumb, and I smashed it into the pond and let it go, and it scurried off soaked. My neighbor drove me to the hospital for a tinnitus jab. I was about 10 years old. Story 12. Former coworker on my first day. If you have any problems with anyone, just let me know. Not a superior or anything, but I took it as weird for a first introduction. This person was all about gossip. I learned a lot about professional versus personal in my first year. And good thing I never really talked to her. I think she was a little annoyed I didn't talk to her much, but she was always in conflict on small things like non-work related stuff with people. Glad to say she's a former coworker. Story 13. When job searching, don't settle for anything less than your perfect dream job. I finished my master's in May of 2020, peak pandemic, and no one was hiring. My options were to settle for something less than perfect so I could have an income, get full-time experience, and not end up starving and homeless or, go broke and be starving and homeless. I settled for a less than perfect offer that I received after a few months of intense job searching and recently transitioned to a much better position at my dream company, thanks to the skills and experiences I gained from the less than perfect job I was in all last year. You can keep the dream job as the end goal, all while working at a starter job. It will provide this amazing asset called money, which will allow you to enjoy life and perhaps increase your skills and training to get ready for that dream job. It's pretty naive for a young person to think that they will land their dream job early on because for a lot of people, it takes years before they settle down in that position. And the point about the COVID pandemic makes it even more silly to turn away job opportunities when they are hard to come by. Story 14. Quit messing with aquariums. You're bad at it. Get a job flipping burgers. Was from my mom. Less than 2 years later, I was the manager of a saltwater reef aquarium store and had a nice apartment. I also made more money than her. Aside from bashing on what I liked, she thought I was bad with aquariums because she saw me cleaning mine weekly. She never would bring my little sister to see my store out of spite, and She would have loved it. When classes of kids came in, I would show them how I fed the sharks and anemones, etc., and let them touch a starfish. I would have shown my sis all kinds of cool stuff, and she was like 10 and would have loved it. I had lots of schools bring in classes as a cheap field trip. Even had a few college classes covering symbiosis and wanting to see examples and other topics. Would have been awesome for my family to have seen me as the boss and work in my element. The youngest manager the store ever had, and I was the youngest employee. I had been in the hobby and obsessed for 10 years, and then I was the boss at my job, well-respected and making a good living doing what I loved. I was 22 years old, worked at about 40 hours a week, 2 days off a month. I ended up turning that store around because it was losing money when I took over. Online reviews for the store all said great things about the store and me by name, but I never got to show my family and have them proud of me because I went against my mom's advice of getting a job flipping burgers, and I went on my own and succeeded doing what I love. Spites are a terrible thing. Still makes me sad today. Stick with what you love, and if you can make a living at it, it won't feel like work. When I first applied at that store, I worked for free just to be around so much awesome marine life. Story 15. Stop feeling depressed and do something. You're not doing anything to change your situation. You lack initiative. I couldn't believe a friend would advise me this when she clearly knew I was going through a hard time, battling depression and living a nightmare in my own house. Lack of initiative? Really? Seeing my therapist every week, my psychiatrist every month, and taking meds to help with my situation when my family is against it? How dare she say that absurd thing to me? When I told her I was really hurt by her insensitive words, she tells me I'm overreacting, being too sensitive, and that I misunderstood her. After her response, I haven't spoken to her since. Story 16. I was a manager at a very young age. I knew the job, but I didn't know the people I was commanding nor my management. Everybody, mom, dad, former manager, owner, patrons of the establishment, co-workers, they all had advice. Most of it from people who had no idea what jobs and my feelings were. I tried to take all that advice instead of just listening to what was inside of me and got me from the bottom to the top. And none of it was bad on its own. Some of it was very self-serving for the person giving it, but it pulled me 100 ways instead of just continuing what I did to get myself there. 20 years later, I have it figured out, but the first few months were really rough. So what exactly is the bad advice here that was given? Because I can think of a takeaway from what they said about some advice being self-serving, which is 1, beware of people's intentions, and only you are 100% looking out for yourself. And 2, always stick with your gut first. It usually does not fail you. Story 17. My uncle almost always gave me good advice to this day that I use, but unquestionably the worst advice I ever got was from him. Never mix what you love with what you do for a living. And so, here I am with a love of building PCs with my own home lab and a resume with a decade of delivery driver jobs. By the time I realized I didn't enjoy it, it was too late, and I was already typecast for driver jobs. It took my oldest sister calling in a favor to get an entry-level IT position after I spent $1,000 on certification. Story 18. Don't apply for any scholarships. There aren't that many, and your grades aren't good enough to get any. My high school guidance counselor told me that during senior year before college. There are thousands of college scholarships available to all types of students of all walks of life. I think that conversation was when I first learned that even if someone has a PhD, they can still be dumb and ignorant. Story 19. As an ADD kid, the guidance counselor was like, go to college. Now, I struggled through high school to begin with. It didn't work out for me. Why he told me that at all is beyond me. Because once I accepted that school wouldn't lead to any benefit to me, my life really came around. Hey fish, climb this tree is the gist of it. And now I'm very close to working for myself in a hands-on skill I've spent years developing. I always looked at ADD with sadness, expecting it to hold me back forever. The real problem was I kept putting myself in boxes that I didn't fit into, because I wanted to be like a regular person deep down, and at least for a long time. Yeah, that always bothered me about school guidance counselors as well. Why? Is it like some unwritten rule that they can only push kids to go to college? That is not the path for everyone. Some people opt for a trade school, military, or simply just take their time off after high school and learn a little bit about themselves. I feel like the pressure to know what you want to study right out of high school is ridiculous when you haven't really been anywhere in the world. Go out there and explore first. College or whatever you choose will always be there. Story 20. My son was 18 months or so and had lots of ear infections. A pediatrician in California said that they would clear up soon enough and he'd outgrow the problem. Moved to Texas when he was 2.5, and the pediatrician here said this kid needs surgery now to resolve these ear infections, and he's losing language development time because he cannot hear. We spent years trying to recover the language development that he missed out on for that critical time frame. Now, over age 30 with a PhD, but he still struggles with verbal communication. Story 21. My best friend at the time, who was also a student pastor, said I should break up with my girlfriend because she didn't want to take my church's low-quality communion. Yeah, it was bad. It literally tasted like cardboard. I should say that I was very involved in the church at that point, and I even wanted to become a pastor myself in the future. That has changed now, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I always put a lot of stock into what my pastors said, so when I received this terrible advice, I took it and ran with it. I don't want it to sound like I blame him. I made the decision to take his advice, so that's on me, and I acknowledge that. The morning that I broke up with her, I didn't give her any chances to stop me. I had a mission, and I wasn't going to fail. I ended it and gave her no say. She was trying to apologize for taking the matter so lightly when it meant so much to me, but my mind was made up. It only took me a few days to realize what a huge mistake I'd made, but the damage was done. I spent 3 months trying to convince her to take me back. We got married in November. Story 22. The advice wasn't to me, but once I was watching an action movie with my younger teen sister and my dad. And when the rugged action hero got together with the love interest, my sister laughed and said, "Didn't they only meet like 3 days ago?" My dad then gave this whole speech about how love at first sight is definitely real and sometimes you just know, and it's fine for them to have fun just after meeting because they're in love. This is dumb advice in general, but it is the worst thing to tell a teenage girl who just hit puberty. Thankfully, my sister is super blunt and dry-witted, and she just arched one eyebrow and said, "Aren't you on your 4th marriage?" I almost choked trying to hold back my reaction. A savage response by the sister, well played. Clearly, that is a dad who has not realized yet that his daughter is now probably more mature than he is. He seemed like he was still thinking of her as an 8-year-old or something. I think love at first sight can be a thing for some people, but that doesn't mean you need to act on it right away. Give it time and proceed with caution, because if the attraction is that strong that quickly, that could either be really wonderful or really disastrous. Story 23. My stepmother told me that if I didn't do my engineering degree at one of the old universities, then employers would never take me seriously and I would struggle in my career. So after completing an engineering foundation at a new university, where I had got on really well, I managed to get a placement at an old one to do my actual degree. Then I spent 3 years struggling in a new city, far away from family, at a university where I just didn't get along. I got depressed and isolated, failing year after year and having to do resits. Finally gave up and returned to my original university, though now unable to get any further student loans, so had to pay the remaining 2 years' tuition out of my own pocket, just under $20,000. And then I completed my degree. Now working in a job that I love with great prospects, but still paying off the private debt I had to get into to pay for the last 2 years of my university. If I had just ignored my stepmother's stupid advice, I could have graduated years earlier and without any personal debt.